They said Nathan Cole was a fool for coming back, the veteran who couldn't let go, the man who'd traded medals for silence, and now apparently the guy who'd inherited a pile of frozen wood at the edge of the mountains. The whole town of Mountain Falls had a way of laughing that didn't sound loud, but it still hurt. Whispered jokes at the diner side glances at the gas station talk about the haunted lodge and the soldier too stubborn to know when to quit. Nathan had heard worse before. In war, laughter sounded different. It was what men did before dying. Here it was what they did when they didn't understand. He drove up the mountain road in his old, black Silverado windshield wipers squeaking against the sleet. Shadow sat beside him, head high, ears alert. 7 years old, pure muscle wrapped in sable fur, a retired canine with scars that mirrored his owner's. The dog watched the trees go by as if he remembered the terrain. Nathan glanced at him. "Don't look at me like that. You're just as crazy as I am for coming back." Shadow huffed through his nose, the sound halfway between a growl and a sigh. The GPS had stopped working 5 miles ago. The snow deepened, bearing the dirt road that wound through the pines. Every few minutes the truck slipped tires spitting ice. The radio crackled with static. Only the wind spoke, whistling through the mirror frame like a ghost trying to find its way home. When the truck crested the final turn, Nathan saw it. Pine Ridge Lodge, or what was left of it. The roof sagged under snow. Windows were boarded up. The porch leaned forward like an old man too proud to sit. A faded wooden sign swung above the door, the paint nearly gone. Pine Ridge Lodge Est, 1952. He parked, killed the engine, and for a moment everything fell silent. No motor, no voices, just the weight of snow pressing on the world. Nathan stepped out, boots sinking deep. Shadow jumped down beside him, his paws leaving perfect tracks in the untouched white. The air smelled like pine sap and rusted metal. It wasn't much of a homecoming. Nathan's breath fogged into the air as he walked toward the porch. His gloved fingers brushed the railing. Splinters bit through the fabric. The wood was cold but solid. He could almost hear a memory trapped inside it. Someone hammering boards. Someone laughing years ago. The wind shifted, carrying voices from far down the hill. He turned. A pickup truck idled by the gate. 2 men leaning out of the window. Locals. One raised a coffee cup in mock salute. "Hey, Commander, you moving in or planning to haunt the place?" The other chuckled. Guess the Navy didn't teach him about property value. Nathan didn't answer. He watched them drive off, their laughter carried away by the storm. He looked back at the lodge. "They're right," he muttered. "It's falling apart." Shadow barked once, sharp and short, as if arguing. Then the dog trotted toward the side of the house, nose low to the snow. He began digging with surprising urgency. Nathan frowned. "Not now, boy." But Shadow kept going, paws throwing snow behind him, ears twitching, tail stiff. Then he stopped. His muzzle hovered over a small metal latch, barely visible beneath the ice. Nathan knelt beside him, brushing away the snow. It was an old trap door built into the foundation, sealed with a padlock, so rusted it looked part of the earth itself. He tugged on it once. It didn't budge. Shadow's eyes met his. Intelligent intent. "You knew it was here," Nathan whispered. He straightened, staring at the old structure. A piece of memory stirred his mother's voice, faint from childhood. "Your uncle kept things buried that weren't meant for money." Nathan pushed the thought away. "It's just a cellar." He turned toward the front door. It resisted when he pushed hinges, screaming. Inside, the air smelled of coal dust and wood smoke, long gone. Cobwebs draped the beams like faded curtains. A single rocking chair stood by the window, frozen mid-sway. He dropped his duffel by the door and rubbed his temples. Home sweet home. Shadow patted in sniffing corners, tail low but steady. He paused at the fireplace, nose brushing a pile of old papers. One piece fluttered free. An envelope yellowed with age. Nathan picked it up. His name was written across the front in a hand he recognized. He tore it open. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't laugh when they mock the lodge. It's older than the war and wiser than men. Under the snow lies what our family kept safe long before bullets and orders. Don't sell it. Trust the dog. Uncle William." Nathan stared at the words. The fireless hearth behind him seemed to breathe. He read the line again. "Trust the dog." Shadow nudged his leg, tail thumping once. Nathan crouched beside him. "What did you get us into, huh?" Outside, the storm thickened. Snow hit the windows like 1,000 quiet knocks. In the distance, thunder rolled low, swallowed by the mountains. He found a lantern near the wall, lit it, and walked toward the back hallway. The flickering light revealed photos hung crookedly. William Cole standing with a group of men in military coats, smiling beside the same lodge back when it still had color in its bones. "Guess this was home for a lot of soldiers," Nathan murmured. He set the photo down. Behind it, tucked into the frame, was a folded newspaper clipping. The headline was almost unreadable, but two words stood out: "Local mechanic missing winter 1984. Nathan's brow tightened. The article mentioned a disappearance near Mountain Falls. The man's name was Daniel West Williams' friend, the same year this lodge closed. Shadow growled low head, turning toward the trap door outside, as if sensing a pulse beneath the ground. "Easy," Nathan said, though the chill in his chest wasn't from the cold anymore. He turned back to the window. Snow was falling harder now, erasing the tracks of the two men who'd mocked him earlier. For a brief second, Nathan wondered if he should have laughed too if the joke wasn't on him after all. But he wasn't here for jokes. He was here because everything else was gone. The divorce papers had arrived on a Tuesday, the termination notice from the security firm on Thursday. "Your combat skills are exceptional, but your integration with the civilian team has been difficult. Translation: you still acted like you were at war." Maybe he was. Nathan had spent 3 nights staring at his service pistol before William's letter arrived. The timing seemed like a cruel joke from a dead man. His uncle had been gone 5 years. A heart attack in his sleep, peaceful, nothing like the violent exits of the men Nathan had served with. The lawyer's call had been brief. "Your uncle left you the lodge. All other assets were liquidated for charity. But he insisted you have the property. And the dog." Shadow. Trained by William before retiring from the K-9 unit, somehow the old man had arranged for the dog to find his way to Nathan after his death. Shadow had arrived at his apartment in Chicago with papers listing him as a PTSD support animal, though Nathan had never applied for one. 3 years together, and sometimes Nathan thought the dog knew him better than he knew himself. The nights when the dreams came, when his muscles locked and his throat closed around screams, Shadow was there. Heavy warmth against his side. A reminder that he wasn't back there in the dust and blood. Shadow barked again, this time at the fireplace. Nathan walked over, running his hand along the mantel. His fingers caught on something. A small lever hidden in the woodwork. He pulled it. A section of the brick back swung open, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay another envelope. This one was newer, the paper crisp. He broke the seal. Military encryption. Old school. The kind they taught in the Cold War, not the digital garbage Nathan had learned. He recognized some of the patterns from William's old books. This would take time to decode, but one phrase stood out, already translated, at the bottom of the page. Project Haven was compromised. Daniel found the truth. They will come for the rest. Shadow whined, sensing the tension in Nathan's shoulders. "It's okay, boy." But it wasn't. Nathan had come here expecting an empty lodge, maybe some old memories. Not cryptic warnings from the grave. Not missing persons. He spread the papers across the dusty table. The deed to the lodge. Property tax records. A survey map of the surrounding 50 acres, all apparently belonging to the estate. And more newspaper clippings, these older and more yellowed. Military exercises in the mountains. Cold War preparations. Bunker construction. Nathan's head throbbed. He needed air. Outside, the snow had slowed, but the cold bit deeper. His breath formed clouds that disappeared into the darkening sky. Shadow bounded ahead, carving paths through the fresh powder, circling back to check on Nathan, as if he were the one needing protection. The property stretched farther than he had realized. Beyond the immediate clearing, pine forest climbed up the slopes, hiding whatever lay beyond. To the north, a ridge rose sharply, its top lost in clouds. Nathan had only been here twice as a child during summer visits. The winter transformed it into an alien landscape. His boots crunched through the snow as he followed Shadow along what might have been a path in warmer months. The dog moved with purpose, stopping occasionally to look back, ensuring Nathan was still following. They crested a small rise and Nathan paused. From here, he could see the whole valley below. Mountain Falls tucked into the crease of land, its lights just beginning to twinkle in the early dusk. Beyond it, the highway that had brought him here, a black ribbon cutting through white. And beyond that, the world he'd left behind. Shadow barked, pulling him back to the present. The dog was pawing at something near a large pine. Nathan knelt beside him, brushing snow away from what appeared to be a stone marker. The inscription was weathered, nearly illegible. MDL 1984, nothing else. "What is it? But what are you showing me?" Shadow whined, continuing to dig. The snow gave way to frozen earth too hard to penetrate. Nathan marked the spot in his mind. He'd need tools to explore further. They continued around the perimeter of the property. Nathan noting landmarks, trying to reconcile the map he'd seen with the actual terrain. The light was fading fast, the temperature dropping with it. They needed to get back. As they turned toward the lodge, Nathan saw it, a flash of light among the trees. A reflection, perhaps, or a flashlight. Someone was watching. He froze, instincts taking over. Shadow sensed it too, body going rigid, a low growl forming in his throat. Nathan held up his hand. Wait. Years of training kicked in. He moved silently toward the tree line, using the gathering darkness as cover. 50 yards. 40. The light bobbed once more, then vanished. 30 yards. The snow betrayed his approach with soft crunches, no matter how carefully he placed his feet. 20 yards. A branch snapped, not under his feet. Something moved in the shadows. Nathan lunged forward, but his target was already running, crashing through the underbrush. He gave chase, but in the darkness, on unfamiliar ground, he was at a disadvantage. Shadow shot past him, a dark blur against the snow. "Shadow, come back." The dog hesitated, then reluctantly returned to his side. Whoever had been watching was gone, leaving only disturbed snow and broken branches. Nathan scanned the tree line, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Nothing. But the message was clear: he wasn't alone here. Back at the lodge, he secured the doors and windows as best he could with the aging locks and hinges. The fireplace took some coaxing, but eventually flames licked at the old logs he'd found stacked on the porch. Shadow curled up on a threadbare rug, eyes never leaving the door. Nathan spread the papers before him again, mind racing. Why would someone be watching the lodge? What had William been involved in? And why send Nathan here now? He picked up the encrypted letter again. With no reference key, decoding would be challenging, but not impossible. William had taught him the basics when he was a teenager, fascinated by his uncle's tales of military intelligence. Now he wished he'd paid more attention. Hours passed. The fire burned down to embers. Shadow's soft snoring, the only sound beyond the occasional creak of the old building, settling. Nathan worked methodically, testing cipher patterns, jotting down possible translations. Near midnight, pieces began to fall into place. Not the entire message, but fragments. Cold War, Federal Reserve, gold, security protocol, betrayal, Langley identity, MDL, the marker in the forest, MD Langley, a name, a code. His eyes burned from strain. Sleep pulled at him, but the fragments wouldn't let go. He needed to understand what he'd stumbled into. Why William had brought him here. The wind picked up outside, howling around the eaves like a living thing. Nathan's eyes drooped despite his determination. Just a short rest. He laid his head on his arms, the papers cushioning his cheek. The dream came as it always did. Dust and heat. The convoy rolling through narrow streets. Martinez laughing about something, his teeth white against his dirt-streaked face. The radio crackling with position reports. Then the first explosion, the world turning sideways. Gunfire. Martinez dragging him from the burning vehicle. The second blast. Blood on his hands, not his own. Martinez's eyes fixed and empty. Nathan jerked awake, a shout dying in his throat. Shadow was there instantly, muzzle pushing against his hand. Breathe, just breathe. He was covered in cold sweat despite the chill in the room. The fire had died completely. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, though the storm clouds made it difficult to tell. He'd slept longer than intended. Shadow whined, nudging him again, then padding to the door. He needed to go out. Nathan rubbed his face, trying to shake off the lingering images of the dream. 5 years since Afghanistan, and still it felt like yesterday. He let Shadow out, watching from the porch as the dog bounded into the fresh snow. The storm had passed, and leaving behind a pristine white landscape under a steel-gray sky. The beauty of it struck him, so different from the dust and rock he'd become accustomed to overseas. A sharp bark drew his attention. Shadow was back at the trap door, digging with renewed determination. Nathan sighed. The dog's fixation on that spot couldn't be coincidence, especially given William's letter. Trust the dog. All right, boy, let me get some tools. He rummaged through a shed attached to the back of the lodge, finding a rusty crowbar and shovel. The padlock on the trap door was corroded but solid. It took considerable effort to break it, the metal finally giving way with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet morning. The door itself was heavier than it looked, reinforced with metal banding beneath the weathered wood. It groaned as Nathan levered it open, revealing narrow wooden steps descending into darkness. The air that rose from below was stale, carrying the scent of earth and old metal. Shadow didn't hesitate, plunging down the steps before Nathan could stop him. "Damn it, Shadow." He grabbed the lantern, lit it quickly, and followed. The cellar was small, almost a crawl space. The lantern's beam caught shelves lined with old crates, some labeled tools, others marked spare fuel. Military efficiency in the organization. William's touch was evident. Nathan explored methodically, examining each shelf, each container. Most held what their labels promised. Basic tools, spare parts for equipment, long since obsolete. Nothing that explained Shadow's urgency or William's cryptic message. Until he reached the far wall. A single metal case sat there. Black military issue, the kind used for sensitive document transport. Shadow nudged it with his nose. Nathan crouched, fingers grazing the case. He flipped the latch. It popped open with a soft metallic snap. Inside was a sealed envelope and beneath it a notebook wrapped in plastic. He pulled out the envelope first. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Nathan," his uncle's voice whispered back through the words as he read. "If you're here, then you followed the dog. Good. That means he still remembers. And maybe you do too. This place, it holds more than memory. It holds a promise. What's under the snow is older than both of us. Older than war. They told me to keep it hidden. I chose to keep it safe. Don't sell the lodge. Not until you know what's buried." Nathan's breath fogged in the cold air. He looked at Shadow, who watched him unmoving. The notebook was filled with sketches, maps of the mountain, annotations, and shorthand dates from the 1980s. One entry was circled in red ink. March 17, 1984. Final crate buried, North Ridge, coordinates encoded. He leaned back, heart thudding. He had expected a broken roof and frozen pipes, not hidden crates, not codes. He closed the case and set it aside, then looked at Shadow again. "You're not just a tracker, you're a damn historian." The dog gave a soft whine and bumped Nathan's arm with his nose, then turned and padded back toward the stairs. Back in the main room, Nathan rebuilt the fire. It caught slow at first, then flared into warmth. He sat with his legs stretched out, the notebook open beside him, the letter folded neatly in his lap. Outside, the wind had died completely. Shadow lay near the fire, eyes half closed but ears still twitching, watchful. Nathan stared at the flames, his voice low. "He knew I'd come here. Left this for me to find. And you never forgot." Shadow didn't move, but something in his posture softened. A loyalty deeper than instinct. Not obedience, belief. Nathan looked toward the window. The snow had stopped falling, and for the first time since returning, he felt the heaviness shift. Not gone, but lighter, like the mountain had exhaled. There was something under this lodge, something his uncle hid, something Shadow remembered, and now so would he. He reached for a pen and circled the date in the notebook, then whispered more to the dog than himself. "Tomorrow we dig." But the mountain had other plans. The storm returned without warning. It came down in thick, sideways sheets, burying the lodge in a matter of minutes. Nathan had been in the middle of clearing snow from the porch roof when Shadow froze near the tree line, ears stiff, eyes locked on the white abyss. "What is it?" Nathan asked, already knowing the answer. Shadow barked once, short, urgent, then bolted into the storm. "Shadow," Nathan shouted, leaping off the steps. He grabbed his coat, yanked on gloves, and followed. The cold slammed into him like a wave. He could barely see 5 feet ahead, but he tracked the dog's paw prints deep and direct. He didn't need to ask what Shadow had heard. It was faint, almost lost in the wind. A cry, thin, desperate. Nathan pushed forward, his boots crunching through the rising snow drifts. Branches scraped his arms. Shadow's dark shape darted ahead, stopping, waiting, then sprinting forward again. Then he saw her, a woman curled against a fallen tree, snow packed around her like a coffin. Her coat was thin, her hat nearly blown away. One leg was twisted awkwardly beneath her. She looked up, blinking in shock. Shadow was already beside her, pressing his body against hers, blocking the wind with practiced precision. Nathan dropped to his knees. "Don't move," he said quickly. "I've got you." Her lips were blue, but her voice was steady. "I lost the road. I didn't think the storm would turn this fast. You're lucky he found you. He slipped his arms under her shoulders. She winced but didn't complain. As he lifted, he noticed her hands' ink-stained fingers, the kind that held chalk more than tools. Come on, we're getting you inside. They pushed back through the storm together. Twice she stumbled, and twice Nathan caught her without a word. Shadow led the way, carving a path through the drifts, checking back every few steps. The lodge came into view like a mirage, warm golden light flickering behind frosted windows. Nathan kicked the door open and helped her inside. Heat from the fireplace wrapped around them instantly. She slumped into the nearest chair, trembling, face flushed from cold. Here, Nathan said, tossing her a wool blanket. Wrap up. Coffee's coming. Shadow lay at her feet, head on his paws, eyes still watching. I owe him more than coffee, she said softly. He saved my life. Nathan poured 2 mugs, handed her one. Name's Nathan Cole. She took a sip, cradling the mug in both hands. Rachel Morgan. I teach at the school in town. Or I used to. Mountain Falls Elementary. She nodded, grimacing slightly as she adjusted her injured leg. History department. Focused on local research until the school board decided some histories were better left untaught. What kind of histories get a teacher fired in a place like this? Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing him. The kind that involve military secrets and missing persons. The kind that certain powerful people prefer to keep buried. She looked around the lodge. This place, I thought it was abandoned. Not yet, Nathan replied. She looked down at Shadow, who thumped his tail once. He's not just a pet, is he? Retired military, same as me. Well, she said, smiling faintly. He's got better instincts than most people I know. What were you doing out in a storm like this? Nathan asked, tending to the fire. Research. There's an old Forest Service cabin about 2 miles up that supposedly has archived reports from the early 80s, records the town hall conveniently lost years ago. She winced as she shifted her leg. Didn't expect the weather to turn so quickly. That leg needs looking at. Nathan knelt beside her chair. May I? She nodded reluctantly. He carefully rolled up her pant leg, revealing a swollen ankle. Not broken from what he could tell, but a nasty sprain. He'd seen worse in the field, treated worse with less. It's not pretty, but I've got a first aid kit. Hang tight. While Nathan rummaged through his duffel, Rachel's eyes wandered the room, taking in the scattered papers, the maps, the photographs. Her gaze lingered on the metal case from the cellar, now open on the table. You're William Cole's nephew, she said suddenly. Not a question. Nathan paused, first aid kit in hand. You knew my uncle. I knew of him, part of my research. She hesitated. He wasn't very popular with certain people in town. Seems to run in the family. She smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed her face. The Coles have always been outsiders here, even when they were insiders. Nathan wrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency, the movements automatic after years of field medicine. That doesn't make any sense. Mountain Falls was built on secrets, Mr. Cole. During the Cold War, this whole area was strategically significant. Your uncle was part of that, and later part of something else. What exactly do you teach, Ms. Morgan? The truth. She met his gaze steadily. When they let me. Outside, the storm howled, throwing itself against the windows like something alive and angry. Shadow's ears twitched at each new gust, but he remained at Rachel's feet, protective. You're not going anywhere tonight, Nathan said, securing the bandage. Storm's too bad, and that ankle needs rest. She nodded, seemingly unsurprised. I've got questions if you're willing. About my uncle, about what he was protecting. Nathan considered her for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. Teacher's eyes used to spotting half-truths and evasions. But there was something else there too. Determination. The look of someone who had been searching for something for a very long time. I don't know what he was protecting, Nathan said finally. I only just got here. But you found something. She nodded toward the case, the notebook. He left you something. Why are you so interested in my uncle's business? Rachel set her coffee mug down carefully. Because 5 years before you were born, my father worked with William Cole. They were friends. And in 1984, my father disappeared for 3 months. When he came back, he was different. He never spoke about that time, not to anyone, not even my mother. And you think it's connected to whatever my uncle was involved in? I know it is. The same year Daniel West went missing. Nathan's hand tightened around his mug, the missing mechanic from the newspaper clipping. You've done your homework. It's literally my job, or was. She attempted to stand wincing. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, but there are answers in this mountain that people have been hiding for decades. Your uncle was one of the few who tried to bring them to light. And you think that's why he left me this place, to continue what he started. I think he left it to you because he trusted you. The question is, what are you going to do with that trust? Nathan had no immediate answer. He'd come to the lodge because he had nowhere else to go. Because it was either there or stare at his service pistol for another night in his empty apartment. He hadn't expected puzzles or coded messages or history teachers with too many questions. But he also hadn't expected to feel anything again. Not purpose, not curiosity, not the slow burn of anger at the thought of his uncle's reputation tarnished his work hidden. Shadow rose suddenly, head turning toward the window. A low growl built in his chest, hackles rising. What is it, boy? The dog moved to the window paws on the sill, staring into the swirling snow. Nathan joined him, peering into the darkness. For a moment he saw nothing. Then, a flash of light. The same flashlight he'd spotted earlier bobbing between the trees. Someone's out there, Rachel said, having limped to his side. Someone who shouldn't be. The light disappeared. Shadow's growl deepened. Stay here, Nathan ordered, grabbing his coat. Lock the door behind me. You're going out there in this... Rachel grabbed his arm. That's insane. Wouldn't be the first time. He whistled for Shadow. Come on, boy. The cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped outside. The snow was falling so heavily it was disorienting, like being underwater. Shadow pressed close to his side, leading the way toward where they'd seen the light. They moved together through the white darkness, the dog's senses far more reliable than his own in these conditions. 50 yards from the lodge, Shadow froze nose high, testing the air. Then he bolted forward, a dark missile against the snow. Nathan followed, trusting the dog's instincts. Ahead he caught a glimpse of movement, a figure in dark clothing trudging through the deep snow. Shadow's bark echoed across the mountain as he closed the distance. The figure turned, saw them coming, and broke into a clumsy run. Not fast enough. Shadow reached them first, not attacking, but circling, cutting off escape routes. Nathan arrived seconds later, grabbing the intruder by the shoulder and spinning them around. A young man, barely 20, wide-eyed with fear. Don't let him bite me, please. He won't bite unless I tell him to, Nathan said, keeping his grip tight. What are you doing on my property? Your property. The young man looked confused. This is Blackwell land. No, it's not. This is Pine Ridge Lodge, coal property. That's not what Mr. Blackwell says. He sent me to check the perimeter, make sure the storm didn't damage the markers. What markers? The young man clamped his mouth shut, suddenly realizing he'd said too much. Who's Blackwell? No answer. Shadow. The dog moved closer, teeth bared. Not a real threat, but the young man didn't know that. Let's try again. Who's Blackwell? Victor Blackwell. Everyone knows him. He owns half the town. The words tumbled out. He told me to check the property line markers, make sure they were still visible after the storm. Why would he care about property lines in the middle of a blizzard? I don't ask questions. He pays me to do jobs, I do them. Nathan studied the young man's face. Fearful but not dishonest. A local kid working for cash. What's your name? Tyler. Tyler Simmons. Well, Tyler Simmons, you're trespassing. And you can tell Blackwell that if he wants to discuss property lines, he can come see me himself. Yes, sir. Tyler's eyes darted to Shadow, then back to Nathan. Can I go now? One more question. This isn't the first time you've been watching the lodge, is it? Tyler swallowed hard. Mr. Blackwell's had me checking on it since the old man died. Said someone needed to keep an eye on the place. Why? I told you I don't ask questions. A pause. But he was real interested when he heard you were coming back. Said to let him know immediately if anyone showed up. Nathan released his grip on Tyler's jacket. Go on, get out of here. And tell Blackwell if he wants to know what happens at Pine Ridge, he can ask me directly. Tyler nodded quickly, then trudged away through the snow, constantly glancing back at Shadow. Nathan watched until he disappeared into the swirling white, then turned back toward the lodge. Shadow followed occasionally, looking over his shoulder, still alert. Inside, Rachel had positioned herself by the door with a fireplace poker clutched in her hands. She lowered it when she saw Nathan. What happened? Who was out there? Kid named Tyler, works for someone called Victor Blackwell. Nathan hung his coat, brushing snow from his shoulders. Apparently been keeping an eye on this place for years. Rachel's face tightened at the name. Blackwell, of course. You know him. Everyone knows Victor Blackwell. He's the reason I lost my job. She moved back to her chair, leg dragging slightly. Ex-military, came back in the late 80s, started buying up land. Now he owns most of the businesses in town, has the mayor in his pocket, and sits on the school board. And he fired you. He suggested the board reconsider my approach to local history. They unanimously agreed I was creating unnecessary controversy. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. What were you teaching that upset him so much? Rachel glanced at the papers spread across the table. The same things your uncle was investigating. Military activities in these mountains during the Cold War. Missing persons, unexplained wealth suddenly appearing in certain families. The connections. And Blackwell didn't want that history taught. He said it was unpatriotic to question the military's activities, that I was dishonoring veterans. She laughed, a short, harsh sound. As if covering up the truth honors anyone. Nathan moved to the table, looking down at the notebook, the maps, his uncle's investigations. So Blackwell knew my uncle. They served together, same unit back in the 70s, but something happened between them. A falling out. Nobody knows exactly what, but they were enemies by the end. Shadow padded over to the fireplace, circling 3 times before settling on the rug, eyes still fixed on the door. And now Blackwell's interested in this property. He's been trying to buy it for years. Your uncle wouldn't sell. Nathan thought about the encrypted message. Project Haven was compromised. Daniel found the truth. They will come for the rest. Did your research ever turn up anything about Project Haven? Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Where did you hear that name? In my uncle's notes, something about it being compromised. She leaned forward, wincing at the pressure on her injured leg. Project Haven was a rumor, a Cold War initiative supposedly based in these mountains. Some kind of emergency resource stockpile, but all the records were classified, then supposedly destroyed in a fire at the regional archive in '91. Convenient. Very. She hesitated. Your uncle believed it was real, that it was still here somewhere under the mountain, and that someone had stolen from it. Someone like Blackwell. I don't have proof, just questions. Too many questions. Nathan looked down at the notebook again, the maps, the coordinates. North Ridge, final crate buried. Suddenly, William's insistence that he keep the lodge, not sell it, made more sense. This wasn't just property, it was evidence. I need to decode the rest of these notes. I can help, Rachel offered. Historical ciphers are a specialty of mine. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. She was already involved, had been before he'd even arrived. And he needed allies here in this town, where his family name carried whispers, not respect. They worked through the night, the storm raging outside, occasional creaks and groans from the old building, punctuating their concentration. Rachel proved adept at breaking down William's cipher system, recognizing patterns Nathan had missed. Piece by piece, the message emerged from the coded pages. A story of Cold War paranoia, of gold reserves hidden in remote locations throughout the country, insurance against Soviet attacks on major cities. Of a small team tasked with maintaining one such cache, hidden within the mountain behind Pine Ridge Lodge. Of trust betrayed when one member discovered the true value of what they guarded. Of Daniel West, who found proof of the theft and disappeared. Of William Cole, who spent decades gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. He was waiting for you, Rachel said softly as dawn broke outside, the storm finally subsiding. He knew you'd come eventually. But why me? Why not go to the authorities? The last page explains. She handed him the final decoded sheet. Nathan, I couldn't trust the system. The same men who stole from Haven rose within it. Military, government, private sector. They protected each other. I needed someone outside, someone with training but not tied to their hierarchy. Someone who understands duty beyond orders. When you read this, I'll be gone. Heart's not what it used to be, but Shadow remembers where everything is hidden. The proof is scattered, but it's all here. North Ridge holds the final piece. Martinez will verify when the time comes. Nathan froze at the name. Martinez. Does that mean something to you? He couldn't speak for a moment, the memories flooding back. Dust and heat, blood on his hands. My squad mate in Afghanistan. He died saving me during an ambush. I'm sorry, Rachel said quietly. It's impossible. Martinez couldn't have known my uncle. He died 5 years before William. They never met. Are you sure? Nathan started to respond, then stopped. Was he sure Martinez had been secretive about his past, about his family? Had mentioned an old family friend who'd recommended him for special forces. But that couldn't be William. The timing made no sense unless... He pulled the metal case closer, rummaging through it until he found what he was looking for. The dog tags. Martinez's dog tags. How had William gotten these? He turned them over in his hands, feeling the familiar raised letters. Ramon Martinez, blood type O negative, Catholic. But as he examined them more closely, he noticed something unusual. A small mark etched into the metal, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. A tiny symbol, an eagle with a shield. This is a Department of Defense intelligence marker, Nathan said slowly. Martinez was intelligence. Rachel leaned closer, examining the tags. Your uncle was DoD intelligence before he retired. That's part of what my research uncovered. He worked in asset security. The pieces shifted in Nathan's mind, forming a new pattern. William Cole, DoD intelligence, asset security, Project Haven, Martinez. He recruited him, Nathan whispered. My uncle recruited Martinez to watch over me. Why would he do that? Because he knew someday he'd need me for this. Nathan gestured to the papers, the maps, the evidence. To finish what he started. Shadow rose suddenly, ears perked toward the window. Outside, the storm had cleared, revealing a pristine white landscape under a brilliant blue sky. And in that clarity, a sound carried up the mountain. Engines, multiple vehicles approaching slowly through the deep snow. Nathan moved to the window. 3 black SUVs forcing their way up the access road. Identical. Government issue. Looks like someone else got William's message too. Shadow growled low in his throat, positioning himself between the window and Rachel. Blackwell, she asked, voice tight. Or worse. Nathan gathered the papers quickly, shoving them back into the metal case. We need to hide these. Where? He thought for a moment. Shadow, come. The dog followed him to the back of the lodge to a loose floorboard Nathan had noticed earlier. He pried it up, revealing a small space beneath. Perfect for the case. He slid it in, replaced the board. What now? Rachel asked as he returned to the main room. Now we find out who's coming to call. Nathan's voice was calm, but inside something had awakened. The same focus that had kept him alive in war zones, the clarity that came with danger. And why they're so interested in what's buried under the snow. The vehicles were getting closer. Shadow moved to Nathan's side, body tense, ready. Rachel stood straighter despite her injury, chin raised slightly. A teacher used to standing her ground. Whatever happens, Nathan said quietly, remember that my uncle believed this was worth protecting, worth dying for maybe. The truth usually is, she replied. Together they watched the approaching vehicles, black against the snow, coming to claim what was never theirs. But Nathan Cole hadn't survived war only to surrender without a fight. And Pine Ridge Lodge had kept its secrets for decades. It could keep them a little longer. Shadow barked once sharp and commanding. Yes, the sound seemed to say. We will protect what matters. We will uncover what's hidden. We will bring light to what lies beneath the snow. And in that moment, for the first time since he'd left the battlefield, Nathan Cole felt something like purpose stirring in his chest. His uncle had trusted him with this legacy, and he would not fail. The black SUVs crawled up the snow-covered road like predatory beasts, deliberate and menacing. Nathan watched from the window, pulse steady, mind calculating distances and options. 3 vehicles meant at least 6 men, probably more. Government-issue vehicles, but that didn't necessarily mean government agents. In his experience, the line between official and private interests often blurred, especially when power and money intersected. Stay away from the windows, he instructed Rachel, who had limped to his side. She nodded, moving back toward the fireplace where Shadow stood guard. Hackles raised a low growl, rumbling in his chest. The lead vehicle stopped 20 yards from the porch, driver's door opening. A man emerged, tall, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive overcoat that seemed absurdly formal for the mountain setting. Even from this distance, Nathan recognized authority in his bearing, command presence, military background. Two more men exited the second vehicle, positioning themselves slightly behind the first man. Security detail, professional stance, hands visible but ready to reach inside their jackets. The third SUV remained running, driver inside. Nathan's training assessed the situation automatically. Tactical disadvantage inside the lodge. Limited exits. No high ground, but home territory advantage. Knowledge of the layout. And shadow an unexpected asset most adversaries underestimated. "That's him," Rachel whispered. "Victor Blackwell." The silver-haired man approached the lodge, his security detail maintaining distance. No visible weapons, but Nathan knew better than to believe that meant unarmed. He moved to the door, hand resting on the frame, body angled to protect his center mass. The knock, when it came, was polite, almost gentle. 3 precise taps. Nathan opened the door, but remained in the threshold, blocking entrance. Victor Blackwell stood on the porch, snow dusting his expensive leather shoes. His face was handsome in a weathered way, deep lines around pale blue eyes that assessed Nathan with practiced neutrality. Those eyes held the cold calculation of a man accustomed to measuring others, finding weaknesses, exploiting them. "Commander Cole." Victor's voice was smooth-cultured, nothing like the rough mountain accent of the locals. "I thought it was time we met properly." "I'm Victor Blackwell." "I know who you are." Nathan kept his tone neutral. "You've been having my property watched." A slight smile. "Young Tyler tends to talk too much. I apologize for the intrusion. I've maintained an interest in Pine Ridge since your uncle's passing." Professional courtesy to a former colleague. Former colleague or former adversary. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those pale eyes, a warning. "Your uncle was a complicated man, brilliant in his way, but prone to obsessions. I hope that's not a family trait." The threat beneath the polite words was unmistakable. Nathan said nothing, waiting. Silence often revealed more than questions. Victor gestured toward the interior of the lodge. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside. It's rather cold out here." "I prefer the cold. Keeps things clear." A laugh, surprisingly genuine. "You're very much like William. Stubborn to the core. It's admirable if impractical." Victor brushed snow from his coat sleeve. "I'll be direct then. I'd like to purchase Pine Ridge Lodge and the surrounding property. I'm prepared to offer considerably above market value. 3 times, in fact." Nathan studied the man, noting the expensive watch peeking from beneath the coat sleeve, the custom-tailored suit visible beneath the open overcoat. The kind of wealth that didn't come from legitimate military pensions or small-town business investments. "Not interested in selling." "I understand sentiment, Commander. Family property has meaning. But this place," Victor gestured to the dilapidated lodge, "it's barely standing. The maintenance alone will cost more than it's worth, and there are complications with the land rights that would make development difficult." "What complications?" "Old military restrictions, zoning issues, nothing insurmountable with the right connections, which I have, but potentially troublesome for someone without local standing." "Sounds like you're threatening me, Mr. Blackwell." "Not at all." Victor's smile remained fixed. "I'm offering you an opportunity. Walk away with a significant profit, avoid years of legal battles and property disputes. It's what any reasonable man would do." Nathan sensed movement behind him, Rachel listening, no doubt recording every word of the conversation in her historian's memory. Victor noticed, too, his gaze shifting past Nathan's shoulder. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge. "Ah, Miss Morgan, I didn't realize you had company. Especially such academically controversial company." Rachel stepped forward, her injured leg barely hindering her movement now. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Mr. Blackwell," still trying to bury history. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Victor's facade of geniality slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder beneath, something dangerous. "History is written by survivors, Ms. Morgan, not by disgraced teachers with agendas." Victor's gaze returned to Nathan. "Consider my offer, Commander. It won't remain open indefinitely. Mountain weather can be treacherous. Accidents happen in these remote areas. It would be a shame to see Pine Ridge fall into further disrepair. Or worse." With that, he turned and walked back toward the waiting SUVs, his security detail falling in around him. Nathan watched until the vehicles disappeared down the mountain road, their dark shapes swallowed by the snow and trees. Rachel closed the door, leaning against it. That wasn't subtle. Men like him don't need subtlety. They have money and influence instead. Nathan moved to the window, scanning the tree line, the access road. He'll have left someone to stand behind to watch. You think he knows about what William found? He knows something's here. Otherwise, why offer 3 times the value? Nathan turned to Shadow, who remained alert, ears forward. But I don't think he knows exactly what William discovered, or he wouldn't be trying to buy the property. He'd have taken it by force long ago. Rachel limped to the table where the decoded papers had been. So what's our next move? The word hung between them. Not his problem alone anymore, but shared. Part of him wanted to reject the Alliance civilian entanglements, complicated missions, created vulnerabilities. But Rachel Morgan was already involved, had been for years fighting her own battle against Blackwell and the secrets he protected. First, we need to know exactly what we're looking for. Then we find it before Blackwell realizes we're getting close. Nathan glanced at Shadow, who had moved to the fireplace, nosing at the bricks. And I think Shadow knows where to start. The dog's behavior at the fireplace wasn't random. Nathan knelt beside him, examining the stonework. His fingers traced the mortar lines, feeling for irregularities. They're a slight depression. He pressed, and a section of the hearth shifted with a grinding sound. Another hidden compartment larger than the first. Inside lay a metal tube, the kind used for storing architectural drawings. Nathan pulled it out, unscrewed the cap, and extracted several yellowed pages. Blueprints from the look of them. Old. Military precision in the lines and annotations. Rachel joined him, her historian's eyes widening as she recognized what they were seeing. These are original plans for a military installation. Cold War era. Underground bunker. Nathan traced the outlined chambers with his finger. Multiple levels, reinforced against nuclear fallout. Project Haven. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't just a stockpile, it was a full fallback position. Look at these supply calculations designed to support 50 personnel for 2 years. Nathan studied the blueprints, his military training, recognizing the strategic elements, defensive positions, emergency exits, self-contained power systems. This isn't just any bunker. This is a command center. During the height of the Cold War, the government built dozens of these across the country. Places where military and government officials could retreat if the Soviets launched nuclear weapons. Most were decommissioned after the Soviet Union fell. But not this one. Nathan pointed to handwritten annotations in the margins. These notes are dated 1992, years after most Cold War bunkers were abandoned. His finger traced a specific notation. Asset relocation protocols. They moved something here after the other sites were decommissioned. Rachel leaned closer. Gold reserves, Treasury Department, fallback holdings. How much? Her finger traced the inventory notation. If these numbers are accurate, millions, maybe tens of millions. The implications settled between them like a physical weight. A secret government gold repository hidden beneath the mountain. The kind of secret worth killing to protect or steal. William believes someone stole from the reserves. Nathan tapped another notation. See this inventory discrepancy. Significant shortfall noted during 1984 audit. 1984, the year Daniel West disappeared. And the year Victor Blackwell suddenly had enough money to start buying up half the town. Nathan rolled the blueprints carefully, returning them to their tube. We need to find the bunker entrance. Shadow whined, pawing at the hearth, then trotted to the window, looking out toward the ridge behind the lodge. I think he's trying to tell us something. Nathan moved to the window, following Shadow's gaze. The snow-covered slope rose steeply behind the lodge, a rocky ridge cutting across its face about halfway up. Nothing obviously unusual, but there. Rachel pointed to a cluster of pine trees denser than the surrounding forest. That's not natural growth. Those trees were planted as camouflage. Nathan grabbed his coat. Let's find out what they're hiding. Outside, the cold air bit at their faces, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pristine snow. Nathan helped Rachel through the deeper drifts, her injured ankles slowing their progress but not stopping it. Shadow bounded ahead, breaking trail, occasionally looking back to ensure they were following. The climb was steeper than it had appeared from the lodge, the snow concealing treacherous footing beneath. Twice Rachel slipped, and twice Nathan caught her, his hands strong at her elbow. They moved in wordless coordination as if they'd been climbing mountains together for years instead of hours. Shadow reached the pine cluster, first circling it with obvious excitement. When Nathan and Rachel arrived, breathing hard from the exertion, the dog was pawing at something half buried in snow, a metal pipe protruding from the ground about 4 inches in diameter. Ventilation shaft. Nathan brushed away the snow, revealing a small panel beside the pipe. And this would be an external access control. The panel was military-grade, designed to withstand extreme conditions. A keypad, now obsolete technology from the early 90s, protected by a weatherproof cover. Nathan tried to pry it open, but decades of mountain weather had fused it shut. "We need tools." He straightened, surveying the surrounding area. The ridge extended in both directions, disappearing into denser forest to the north. This vent means we're close, but it's not the main entrance. That would be bigger, more heavily concealed. Rachel shaded her eyes, looking north along the ridge. "If I were hiding a bunker entrance, I'd put it where natural features could disguise it, a rock formation or a cave." Nathan finished her thought, pointing to a dark shadow visible among the trees further along the ridge. "That could be it." Shadow was already moving in that direction, confirming their suspicion. They followed Rachel, grimacing with each step, but refusing to turn back. The terrain grew rockier, the snow thinner where wind had scoured the exposed ridge. The cave mouth was small, easily overlooked, unless you knew what to search for. Natural rock formations partially obscured it, and years of forest growth had further camouflaged the entrance. But as they drew closer, Nathan noted the too regular shape of the opening, the subtle reinforcement at the edges. Not natural, constructed then disguised to appear natural. Shadow disappeared inside without hesitation. Nathan pulled a flashlight from his pocket, gesturing for Rachel to stay close. "Watch your step. No telling what condition this place is in after all these years." The beam of light revealed a narrow passage extending about 15 feet before opening into a small chamber. There, set into the rock wall, was a heavy steel door, military grade, no external handle or obvious locking mechanism. A defunct keypad similar to the one by the ventilation shaft was mounted beside it. Rachel ran her hand over the door's surface, historian's reverence in her touch. "This is it, the haven entrance." Sealed tight, Nathan examined the keypad, the door frame, looking for weaknesses. These systems usually had mechanical overrides for emergencies. Maintenance access. He swept the flashlight beam methodically across the chamber walls, stopping at a section that seemed slightly different from the surrounding rock. Pressing against it revealed a small panel that slid aside, exposing a manual valve. Emergency override. Nathan gripped the valve with both hands, muscles straining as he attempted to turn it. Decades of disuse had all but fused the mechanism. Little help here. Rachel positioned herself beside him, adding her strength to his. Together they forced the valve to move, metal groaning in protest. A quarter turn, half, then a full rotation accompanied by the sound of internal bolts disengaging. The massive door shuddered, then began to swing inward on hydraulic hinges that still functioned despite years of abandonment. Stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of metal and concrete in time. Shadow darted through the opening, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Nathan adjusted his flashlight, revealing a sloping corridor leading downward, emergency lights long dead along the walls. Military construction. Nathan noted the reinforced ceiling, the precisely engineered angle of the descent, designed to withstand significant blast pressure. They proceeded cautiously down the corridor, the beam of the flashlight illuminating decades of dust, but no footprints. No signs of recent entry. The corridor ended at another door, this one partially open. Beyond it lay a larger chamber filled with control consoles, communication equipment, and monitoring stations. A command center preserved like a time capsule from the late Cold War. Rachel moved among the consoles, her historian's mind cataloging each detail. "This is extraordinary. A complete government continuity facility just abandoned." "Not completely abandoned." Nathan pointed to a far door marked Asset Security. "That's what we're looking for." The asset security door was locked, but the same emergency override system existed here. Another hidden valve, another struggle to turn frozen mechanics. This time when the door opened, the flashlight beam reflected back at them, glinting off metal surfaces within. The room was smaller than the command center, designed for a single purpose, a vault. Steel shelving lined the walls, divided into numbered sections. But the shelves were mostly empty. Only a few metal containers remained their seals intact. Nathan approached one examining the government markings. Treasury Department, Federal Reserve. Each container certified to hold standard gold bars. This was a gold repository. He ran his hand over a container's lid. But most of it's gone. Rachel moved further into the vault, counting empty spaces. According to the inventory list from the blueprints, there should be over 100 containers. I count maybe 10 left. Blackwell. Nathan's voice hardened. He didn't just take a few bars, he looted the entire repository. But how this facility would have had multiple security protocols, inventory checks. Inside help. Nathan swept the flashlight around the room, stopping at a small desk in the corner. A logbook lay open, the last entry dated March 15, 1984. The same time Daniel West disappeared. Rachel joined him at the desk examining the logbook. This is it, proof of the theft. Each inventory record is signed by the supervising officer. She pointed to a signature. M.D. Langley, Blackwell's code name. And the witnessing signature on each form. Nathan felt his throat tighten. William Cole. My uncle was here when it happened. But William wouldn't have been part of this. Not willingly. Rachel turned pages scanning entries. Look at these notes in the margins. Questions about inventory discrepancies. William was tracking the theft. Nathan continued examining the room, looking for more evidence. His flashlight beam caught something in the far corner, a small door almost concealed behind one of the shelving units. There's another room back here. The door wasn't locked. Beyond it lay a small office space, a desk, filing cabinets, maps on the wall showing the surrounding mountain range. But what drew Nathan's attention was a framed photograph on the desk face down, as if someone had deliberately hidden it. He picked it up, turning it over. 3 men in military uniforms stood before the Pine Ridge Lodge, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. He recognized his uncle immediately. Beside him stood a younger Victor Blackwell. And the third man? Daniel West. Rachel had moved to his side, recognizing the faces. The 3 original custodians of Haven. They were friends. Nathan studied the photo, the easy camaraderie visible in their postures, their expressions. Before whatever happened in '84. Shadow's bark echoed from the main vault, sharp and urgent. Nathan set down the photo, moving quickly back to the larger room. The dog stood by one of the remaining containers, pawing at it insistently. Nathan knelt beside the container, examining the seal. Unlike the others, this one showed signs of tampering, subtle but visible to trained eyes. He broke the compromised seal, lifting the lid. Instead of gold bars, the container held a waterproof case. Inside that, protected from the elements and time, lay a leather-bound journal and a small recording device. Old technology, a micro-cassette recorder popular in the 1980s. Daniel West's journal. Rachel's voice was hushed, reverential. William told me he kept meticulous records of everything. Nathan opened the journal, carefully, brittle pages covered in dense handwriting. Dates, times, observations. The mundane details of bunker maintenance interspersed with personal reflections. He flipped to the final entries dated March 1984. The tone changed dramatically in these last pages. Suspicion, concern, then alarm. MD has been accessing the vault during night shifts when he thinks no one is watching. I've cataloged discrepancies in 15 containers so far. W doesn't want to believe it, but the evidence is mounting. Our friend is stealing from us, from the country. I've started recording our conversations as backup. Tomorrow I confront him directly. God help us, if I'm right. The final entry ended there. Daniel West had disappeared the next day. Nathan picked up the micro-cassette recorder, an unlikely piece of evidence to survive decades in an abandoned bunker. He pressed play, not expecting the ancient batteries to still function. But they did. The tape began to play, the sound quality poor, but the voices distinguishable. 3 men arguing. Daniel West's voice high with tension. I've counted Victor. Every missing bar, 17 million in gold, vanished on your watch. Blackwell's voice younger but recognizable. You're being paranoid, Danny. Inventory errors happen. Then William Cole trying to mediate. We need to report the discrepancy. Victor, protocol demands it. Blackwell again, tone hardening. Report what? That we've been skimming gold for years. All of us, they'll court-martial us. Throw away the key. You think they care which of us took more? West's voice rising. I never took a damn thing. Neither did Will. This is all you, a crash, struggle sounds, William shouting for them to stop. Then Blackwell chillingly calm. You're making a serious mistake, Danny. This doesn't end well for whistleblowers. West defiant. I've already mailed copies of my records to 3 different people. If anything happens to me, you're finished. Blackwell laughed, devoid of humor. Always the Boy Scout. Fine. We'll do this by the book. Full inventory tomorrow, witnessed by the Major. We'll see what turns up. The recording ended there. Nathan and Rachel stood in silence, the weight of what they'd heard settling over them. Evidence of theft, of confrontation. The day before Daniel West vanished. He killed him. Rachel's voice was tight. Blackwell killed West to cover up the theft. Nathan rewound the tape, listening again to his uncle's voice, trying to keep peace between his friends. But he couldn't prove it. That's why William spent decades gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And Blackwell's been searching for this proof ever since. That's why he wants the lodge so badly. He knows William hid evidence somewhere on the property. Shadow growled suddenly, head turning toward the corridor they'd entered through. Nathan killed the flashlight, immediately plunging them into darkness. He moved silently to Rachel's side, his voice a bare whisper against her ear. Someone's coming. They stood motionless in the darkness, listening, footsteps multiple sets moving with military precision, flashlight beams sweeping the main command center beyond the vault door. Blackwell's men. Nathan gathered the journal and recorder, shoving them inside his coat. Is there another way out of here? Rachel pointed to the small office. Emergency exit. All these facilities had them. Should be a ladder shaft leading to a surface hatch. They moved quietly through the office, Shadow padding silently beside them. Behind a filing cabinet, just as Rachel had predicted, was a narrow door marked Emergency Evacuation Route. Nathan eased it open, revealing a vertical shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall, ascending into darkness. You go first. He helped Rachel onto the ladder, her injured ankle making the climb precarious. Shadow and I will be right behind you. The voices were closer now, entering the vault. Nathan whistled softly, the signal for Shadow to follow, and began climbing after Rachel. The shaft was narrow, the air stale, but the ladder rungs held firm, despite decades of disuse. 30 feet up, Rachel's whisper floated down. Hatch above me. It's stuck. Nathan climbed past her in the confined space, positioning himself on the rungs above. He braced his back against the shaft wall, hands gripping the hatch wheel. Like the other mechanisms in the bunker, years of disuse had nearly welded it in place. The voices below grew louder. Flashlight beams probed the office they just left. It was only a matter of moments before their escape route was discovered. Nathan strained against the hatch wheel muscles, burning with effort. A quarter turn, seized metal groaning in protest. Then suddenly it gave way, spinning freely. The hatch swung upward, letting in a blast of cold mountain air and fading evening light. He climbed out quickly, then reached down to help Rachel. Shadow followed the dog, remarkably adept at navigating the vertical shaft. Once all 3 were clear, Nathan closed the hatch, searching for a way to seal it. A nearby fallen branch served as a makeshift lock wedged through the external handle. They'd emerged in dense forest about a quarter-mile north of where they'd entered the bunker. The sun was setting, long shadows stretching across the snow. Nathan oriented himself quickly, identifying the direction back to the lodge. We need to move. They'll figure out where we exited soon enough. He supported Rachel as they began making their way through the trees, Shadow ranging ahead to find the easiest path through the snow. Did you see who it was? Rachel asked, moving as quickly as her injury allowed. Blackwell's security team. Same men from the SUVs this morning. Nathan kept his voice low, though they were well away from the bunker now. He must have realized we were onto something when I rejected his offer. Or he has someone watching the lodge. Saw us leave, followed our tracks. Rachel stumbled, caught herself against a tree trunk. The question is, did he come himself or just send his men? Either way, we've got what matters. Nathan patted his coat where the journal and recorder were secured. Proof of his theft. Evidence that's been hidden for almost 40 years. The lodge came into view as they crested a small rise, its windows glowing warm in the gathering dusk. Nathan scanned the surrounding area for signs of surveillance or ambush, finding nothing obvious but taking no chances. Stay in the trees, we'll circle around, approach from the back. They moved through the forest's edge, using the lengthening shadows as cover. Shadow suddenly stiffened, nose testing the air, a low growl building in his chest. "What is it, boy?" The dog's gaze was fixed on the lodge. Nathan followed his line of sight, noticing what he'd missed before a dark shape moving on the porch. Someone was at the lodge trying to enter. Single individual, Nathan whispered, military assessment automatic. No visible backup. Could be a scout. Or a distraction while others are positioning elsewhere. Nathan considered their options. Return to the lodge and potentially walk into an ambush, or retreat, temporarily lose any evidence still hidden there. Shadow made the decision for them, breaking from cover and racing toward the lodge, a dark missile against the snow. Nathan cursed under his breath, then gestured for Rachel to stay put. "If anything happens, head for town. Get to the sheriff." Before she could protest, he was moving following Shadow's path, but using the terrain for cover, approaching from an angle that kept him concealed until the last possible moment. The figure on the porch had managed to open the door and was just stepping inside when Shadow arrived, a snarling fury of teeth and muscle. The man shouted in surprise, stumbling backward, falling off the porch into the snow. Nathan reached the scene seconds later, ready for confrontation. But what he found instead was Shadow standing over a terrified Tyler Simmons, the young man who'd been watching the property for Blackwell. "Don't let him bite me." Tyler's hands were raised in surrender, his face pale with fear. "I just came to warn you," Nathan signaled, Shadow to back down, the dog obeying but remaining vigilant. "Warn me about what more of Blackwell's threats?" "No, he's coming himself, tonight, with his whole security team." Tyler scrambled to his feet, brushing snow from his clothes. "After you turned down his offer, he went crazy. Started talking about taking care of loose ends, securing the property once and for all." "Why are you telling me this?" Nathan studied the young man's face, looking for deception. Tyler swallowed hard. "My dad worked with your uncle. They were friends. Dad always said William Cole was the only honest man in Mountain Falls." His voice dropped. "He also said if anything ever happened to him, I should trust a Cole before a Blackwell." Rachel emerged from the trees, having ignored Nathan's instruction to stay hidden. "Tyler's father was James Simmons. He worked maintenance at the elementary school when I first started teaching." She approached the young man. "Your dad disappeared for a while back in '99, didn't he, right after he started talking about the old military facilities in the mountains?" Tyler nodded, eyes downcast. 3 months. When he came back, he never mentioned it again. But he was different, scared all the time. The pattern was becoming clear. Anyone who probed too deeply into Mountain Falls' secrets faced consequences. West had disappeared permanently. James Simmons had been silenced. William Cole had spent decades carefully building his case, waiting for the right moment. And now Victor Blackwell was coming to eliminate the final threat to his secret. "When?" Nathan asked. "How much time do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." Tyler glanced nervously at the darkening sky. "He was gathering his team when I left town." "Why should we believe you?" Rachel's historian's skepticism surfaced. "You've been working for Blackwell for years." "Because Blackwell killed Daniel West." Tyler's voice shook slightly. "Everyone in town knows it, even if they don't say it. And my dad always believed he'd be next if he ever spoke up." The young man straightened. "I'm done being scared. Done helping cover up whatever happened on this mountain." Nathan made his decision. "Get inside, all of you." He ushered them toward the lodge. "We need to prepare." The interior of the lodge felt different now, not abandoned, but a fortress being readied for siege. Nathan moved quickly, securing doors and windows, taking inventory of potential weapons and resources. "We can't stay here," Rachel argued as she helped barricade a window. "Blackwell has numbers and firepower. We should take the evidence to the authorities and say that we broke into a forgotten government facility and stole documents." Nathan shook his head. "Blackwell has influence. He could spin this a dozen ways before we ever get a fair hearing." "Then what's your plan?" Nathan paused, the weight of command settling over him like a familiar cloak. In Afghanistan, he'd led men through worse situations with fewer resources and more dire consequences for failure. This was familiar territory. This was what he was trained for. "We make Blackwell come to us on our terms. Set the battlefield to our advantage." He turned to Tyler. "How many men will he bring?" 4-man security team, plus himself. "Armed, concealed handguns, usually. Maybe more tonight." Nathan nodded, mind already mapping the coming confrontation. Rachel, gather everything we've found, the Blueprints Journal recorder. Tyler, I need to know exactly how Blackwell's team operates. Formation, communication, who takes point? As they worked, Nathan felt something shift inside him. The fog of purposelessness that had clouded his life since discharge burning away in the face of immediate threat. This was clarity. This was purpose. Defending what mattered. Protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The core values that had led him to military service in the first place. Shadow seemed to sense the change, staying close, alert, and ready. The dog that had guided him through the darkness of civilian life now prepared to guide him through literal darkness, back into the familiar territory of tactical engagement. Rachel approached, voice lowered so Tyler couldn't overhear. You're enjoying this. Nathan paused, caught off guard by her perception. Not enjoying, but it makes sense. This kind of situation, it's what I was trained for. You miss it, the service, the mission. I miss having purpose. The admission came easier than he expected. After discharge, everything seemed gray, meaningless. I was just going through motions. Rachel's eyes softened with understanding, not pity. And now I have something worth fighting for. She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded, returning to her task of securing the evidence. Nathan watched her, this civilian historian with a soldier's determination, a fighter's spirit. In another life, she might have made an exceptional intelligence officer. Her attention to detail and pattern recognition serving her country instead of her classroom. Outside, the mountain, night had descended, fully, stars brilliant in the clear air. The storm had passed completely, leaving perfect visibility, the snow-covered landscape almost luminous under moonlight. Good conditions for Blackwell's approach, but also good conditions for defense. No concealing weather, no obscured sightlines. Nathan gathered Rachel and Tyler in the main room, Shadow at his side. Blackwell's men will approach from the main road. They'll secure the perimeter before moving in. Standard procedure would put 2 men on the front, 2 covering the rear. What are our options? Rachel asked, practical, despite the fear evident in her tense posture. We could try to slip past them, make for town. Nathan gestured toward the back of the lodge. Or we stand our ground, use the home territory advantage. If we run, they'll track us. Tyler's voice had gained confidence. Blackwell's head of security, Jenkins, was force recon. He'll have the road covered and men in the woods before they make any frontal approach. Nathan reassessed Tyler, seeing more intelligence and observation skills than he'd initially credited the young man with. You've been paying attention. Had to, working for a man like Blackwell. Rachel placed the evidence journal recorder blueprints on the table. This is what matters. Getting this to someone who can act on it. Nathan nodded, decision crystallizing. We split up. Rachel takes the evidence, heads for town using the Old Forest Service trail, less likely to be watched. Tyler guides her since he knows the terrain. He turned to Shadow. The dog goes with me. I'll create a diversion here, make them think we're all still inside, buy you time to reach the sheriff's office. That's suicide, Rachel protested. You can't hold off 5 armed men alone. I'm not planning to fight them directly, just keep them occupied, confused, chasing shadows. Nathan's mouth curved in a grim smile. I've played this game before in much worse conditions. Tyler seemed uncertain. Blackwell won't stop. Even if you slow him down tonight, he'll just come back with more men. Then we make tonight count. Give him something to worry about besides us. Nathan pulled out his phone, checking the signal. 1 bar barely. Does the sheriff know about Blackwell's activities? Would he act on evidence if it were presented? Tyler hesitated. Sheriff Harding is complicated. He doesn't like Blackwell, but he's careful not to cross him openly. Hard to tell which way he'd jump. We need insurance. Nathan gestured to Rachel's phone. Record everything. The journal contents, the tape, our testimony. Send it to multiple sources, news outlets, state police, FBI. Rachel nodded, already typing. I have contacts at the State Historical Society, former colleagues at universities, people who would take this seriously. Do it, then prepare to move. You'll need warm clothes, emergency supplies. Nathan checked his watch. We've got maybe an hour before they arrive based on Tyler's timeline. As Rachel and Tyler gathered what they needed, Nathan slipped outside with Shadow circling the lodge perimeter, setting small tripwires across likely approach paths, nothing lethal, just noisemakers fashioned from lodge supplies. Early warning systems. He positioned fallen branches to channel movement towards certain areas away from others, creating a battlefield that would work to his advantage. The night air was bitterly cold, his breath forming clouds before his face. Shadow moved beside him, occasionally stopping to scent the air, alert for approaching threats. Nathan found himself grateful for the dog's presence, for his uncle's foresight in ensuring Shadow would find his way to him. When he returned to the lodge, Rachel and Tyler were ready, dressed in the warmest clothing, available backpacks containing the evidence and survival supplies. Rachel's face was set in determined lines. Her historian's passion for truth transformed into a soldier's resolve to complete the mission. The Forest Service trail starts a quarter-mile east of here, Tyler explained, pointing to a crude map he'd drawn. It's not maintained anymore, but it leads directly to the backside of town. We can reach the sheriff's office without using main roads. Nathan nodded approval. Good. Move fast but careful. If you hear vehicles get off the trail, hide until they pass. Rachel stepped closer, her voice low. What about you? How will you get out once we're clear? I've got exit routes planned. The lie came easily, professional reassurance to a civilian who didn't need the burden of his tactical reality. In truth, his options were limited. Create the diversion, hope it bought enough time, then attempt to extract if conditions allowed. Standard high-risk operation parameters. She studied his face, seeing more than he intended. Don't play the hero, Nathan. This isn't Afghanistan. You're not expendable here. The words caught him off guard. In the military, the mission always came first. Individual survival was secondary. The concept that he specifically mattered, that his life had value beyond his utility, was foreign territory. I'll be right behind you, he promised, more sincerity in the words than he had intended. Just need to make sure Blackwell follows the wrong trail. Rachel held his gaze a moment longer, then did something unexpected. She stepped forward and pressed a kiss into his cheek, brief but deliberate. For luck, she whispered, then turned away, gesturing for Tyler to lead on. Nathan watched them disappear into the trees east of the lodge, Shadow whining softly beside him. Not yet, boy, he murmured, scratching the dog's ears. You and I have work to do first. He returned inside, setting the stage for Blackwell's arrival. Lights positioned to suggest multiple occupants. Recordings of conversation played at low volume from his phone, hidden in different rooms. Small trip wires inside the lodge itself, designed to create noise and confusion. Then he settled in to wait, Shadow at his side. The comfortable weight of purpose settled once more upon his shoulders. The headlights appeared at 11:42 p.m., cutting through the darkness at the bottom of the access road. Two vehicles, this time not the official-looking SUVs from earlier, but nondescript black sedans. Civilian anonymity. Nathan watched from an upstairs window as they stopped well short of the lodge, killing lights and engines. Dark figures emerged, moving with military precision. 4 men plus Blackwell, just as Tyler had predicted. They spread out, establishing a perimeter before approaching. Professional, methodical, taking no chances. Nathan slipped away from the window, moving silently through the old building, Shadow following like a shadow himself. The first tripwire triggered at 11:51, a soft clatter of displaced cans near the eastern approach. Phase 1 beginning as expected. Blackwell's men investigating potential threats before advancing. The second wire triggered 2 minutes later, west side. They were encircling the lodge, cutting off escape routes. Standard procedure for a building seizure. Nathan positioned himself near the back door, ready for the next phase of his plan. A soft noise boot on wooden step alerted him to the first man approaching the porch. Shadow's ears flicked forward, but the dog remained silent, trained to stealth when needed. Nathan waited until the footsteps reached the door, then triggered the recording in the front room, muffled voices, movement sounds, creating the illusion of occupants unaware of the approaching threat. The man at the back door spoke quietly into a radio. Nathan couldn't hear the words, but the intent was clear. Reporting position, awaiting orders. The response came moments later, and the man tested the door handle. Locked, but not for long. These would be men with skills, tools for quiet entry. Now came the critical moment. Nathan signaled Shadow a hand gesture, silent but clear. The dog slipped away, moving through the prearranged route to the side window, deliberately left unlatched. This was the gamble, that Blackwell's men would be focused on doors, not windows, that their attention would follow the most obvious threat. Shadow exited through the window just as the lock on the back door began to give way. Nathan retreated upstairs, positioning himself at the end of the hallway, Another recording playing softly from the main bedroom. Footsteps below. Two men entering, moving with practiced caution. Outside, Shadow had one job: create a diversion that would draw attention away from Rachel and Tyler's escape route. The dog had been trained for precisely this kind of work, though in different circumstances, different battlefields. Nathan heard the sharp bark once, twice, then a series of alarm shouts from outside. Shadow in action, harassing the perimeter team, creating chaos and confusion. The men below redirected instantly, radioing their colleagues, moving back toward the front of the lodge. This was his window. Nathan slipped down the back stairs, using the distraction to exit through the now open back door. The night air embraced him, the snow illuminated by moonlight, providing both visibility and challenge. His footprints would be clearly visible, but so would those of his pursuers. He moved quickly away from the lodge, heading west, opposite from Rachel and Tyler's escape route, leading the pursuit away from them. 30 yards out, he paused behind a large pine, watching. The lodge's windows glowed with activity, now flashlight beams sweeping the interior. They discovered the deception, realized the recordings for what they were. A sharp whistle cut through the night, Blackwell calling his team to regroup. Nathan used the moment to put more distance between himself and the lodge, moving deeper into the forest. Shadow would join him at the prearranged location if all went according to plan. But plans rarely survive first contact with the enemy. The crack of a gunshot shattered the night's stillness. Then another. Not warning shots, the distinctive sound of a hunting rifle. Powerful. Precise. A yelp of pain followed Shadow. Nathan's blood turned to ice. Without thought, without tactical consideration, he changed direction, moving toward the sound. Shadow was down, injured, or worse. Professional discipline warred with personal attachment. The mission ensuring Rachel and Tyler's escape demanded he continue drawing pursuit away. But Shadow was more than an asset, more than a service animal. He was family. The last connection to William Cole, the companion who had saved Nathan from his darkest moments after discharge. The choice made itself. Nathan moved toward the sound, all stealth abandoned, in favor of speed. Through the trees, he caught glimpses of movement, Blackwell's men converging on something on the ground. Shadow. Rage rose in Nathan's chest, cold and focused. Not the hot anger of youth, but the deadly precision of a seasoned operator. These men had shot a dog, his dog, to flush out their quarry. They'd miscalculated badly. He circled to approach from the northeast, using the trees for cover. 3 men stood in a small clearing, flashlights illuminating Shadow's dark form on the snow. The dog was alive, attempting to rise despite a visible wound on his flank. Blood stained the snow beneath him, shockingly vivid against the white. Victor Blackwell's voice carried clearly through the night air. "Enough games, Commander Cole. We know you're out there. Your dog needs medical attention. Come out now and I'll ensure he receives it. Continue this foolishness and we'll put him down." The casual cruelty, the assumption of victory, these were the hallmarks of a man accustomed to others bending to his will. A man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. Until now. Nathan surveyed his options, the tactical situation. 3 men in the clearing, Blackwell, and 2 security personnel, 2 more likely in pursuit elsewhere. Armed, trained, but overconfident, expecting compliance rather than counterstrike. Shadow needed him. Rachel and Tyler needed time. Both objectives required the same action: neutralize the immediate threat, create confusion among the enemy ranks. The moment of decision arrived with perfect clarity. Nathan Cole, adrift in civilian life, had found his purpose again. Not in war, but in protection. Not in service to abstract ideals, but to concrete goods: truth, justice, loyalty. The very values his uncle had lived by, had preserved evidence for, had ultimately entrusted to him. He moved silently to the edge of the clearing, gathering what he needed from the forest floor. Then, with the precision that had made him an exemplary SEAL officer, he launched his counterattack. The first stone struck with pinpoint accuracy, hitting the nearest security guard at the base of the skull. Not lethal force, but enough to disorient, to create the opening needed. Before the others could react, Nathan was moving, a shadow among shadows, winter and night, and righteous purpose made flesh. Shadow whimpered softly as Nathan burst into the clearing, but there was recognition in the sound, trust that help had arrived. And despite his wound, despite the blood on the snow, the dog struggled to his feet. Instinct overcoming pain, ready to fight alongside his human once more. Together, they faced Blackwell and his remaining men, a former SEAL and his wounded companion against armed mercenaries and the man who had buried truth beneath snow and silence for decades. The mountain held its breath, waiting to see which would prevail. Victor Blackwell stood motionless in the clearing moonlight, painting his silver hair with an almost ethereal glow. He seemed unsurprised by Nathan's sudden appearance, his pale eyes calmly assessing the situation as his remaining security guard drew his weapon. Behind them, the man Nathan had struck with the stone was struggling to his knees, disoriented but conscious. "Commander Cole, at last we dispense with the games." Blackwell's voice carried the practiced authority of a man accustomed to command to obedience. "Your uncle had the same flair for dramatic confrontation. Must be genetic. Step away from my dog." Nathan positioned himself between Shadow and the armed guard, calculating distances, angles, the likelihood of clean shots versus grazes in the uncertain light. Shadow growled low and threatening despite his injury, blood matting the fur along his flank. The wound wasn't immediately life-threatening, a graze rather than a direct hit, but it needed treatment soon. "I've upset you." Blackwell's tone was almost conciliatory. That wasn't the intention. Dogs are collateral, unfortunate but ultimately unimportant in our broader discussion. Which is what exactly your theft of federal gold reserves, your murder of Daniel West, or your decades of corrupting this town with blood money. Nathan kept his voice steady, matching Blackwell's calm with the focused intensity he'd relied on during hostage negotiations in war zones. "You've been busy." Blackwell nodded to his guard, a subtle gesture that caused the man to lower his weapon slightly. Not holstering it, but decreasing the immediate threat, finding William's little treasure trove of conspiracy theories and half-truths. "I expected as much. It's why I offered to buy the property. Would have been cleaner for everyone." "Cleaner for you?" Nathan scanned the tree line alert for the other security personnel. They were out there, likely repositioning following protocols for perimeter containment. "How many people have you silenced on over the years?" "Blackwell, Daniel West, James Simmons. Who else?" "You misunderstand what happened here." Blackwell spread his hands in a gesture of openness that didn't reach his eyes. "We protected this community. The gold was abandoned. The government had forgotten this facility existed after the Cold War wound down. Protocol dictated destruction of the bunker and relocation of assets, but the paperwork disappeared. All that wealth just sitting there when this town was dying. The mines closed, the timber industry collapsing. We made a decision. We... You mean you, my uncle and West." Blackwell's smile tightened. "Your uncle lacked vision. Daniel lacked courage. I offered them shares equal three-way split. They refused. Called it treason. West threatened to report everything as if the government would thank him for his honesty rather than bury him for the security breach. He became unstable, dangerous. So you killed him. I protected what we built. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary." William understood that eventually. "Why do you think he never came forward with his so-called evidence? He knew exposing me would destroy the town. Thousands of lives upended for what ancient history? A bookkeeping discrepancy. The casual dismissal of murder as sacrifice and theft of millions as a bookkeeping discrepancy struck Nathan with physical force. The moral vacancy behind Blackwell's calm reasoning was more chilling than any shouted threat or brandished weapon. "My uncle spent decades building a case against you. He didn't stay silent. He was waiting for the right moment, and chose you as his instrument of justice." Blackwell laughed, the sound oddly genuine. William always did have a romantic streak, seeing patterns and purpose where there was only coincidence and chaos. The faithful retriever, he gestured at Shadow, the noble nephew, a posthumous revenge fantasy worthy of the pulp novels he loved so much. The words were calculated to undermine, to seed doubt, but Nathan had navigated psychological warfare before. "Where are the other two members of your security team, the ones who should be flanking us right now?" Blackwell's expression flickered the first crack in his composed facade. "Your companions, the teacher and young Tyler." "Where are they, Commander?" The mutual recognition that each had outmaneuvered the other hung in the winter air between them. Rachel and Tyler had escaped with the evidence or been captured. Blackwell's missing men were either pursuing them or neutralized. "I asked first." Nathan took a calculated risk, stepping closer to Blackwell, forcing the guard to adjust his aim. Shadow needs medical attention. Let me take him to town, and whatever happens next happens between us. Taking your dog to town isn't on the table. Neither is your departure from this mountain. Blackwell's false conviviality vanished, revealing the steel beneath. You've disrupted 4 decades of careful work, threatened everything I've built. That requires a permanent solution. The guard raised his weapon again, sighting on Nathan's chest. Behind him, the second guard had recovered enough to draw his sidearm, creating a crossfire scenario with Nathan and Shadow in the middle. Shadow sensed the escalation, muscles tensing, despite his injury, ready to launch himself at the nearest threat. Nathan placed a steadying hand on the dog's back, feeling the vibration of his continuous low growl. "You're making a mistake, Blackwell." Nathan kept his voice calm, buying seconds assessing options. "My uncle prepared for this. The evidence doesn't just exist in one place. Kill me, and it still gets out. You overestimate William's foresight and underestimate my resources." Blackwell signaled to his men with a slight nod. "Finish this. Make it clean. The dog, too." What happened next unfolded with the surreal clarity that Nathan had experienced in combat time, seeming to stretch, details sharpening his trained body, responding before conscious thought could form. Shadow lunged at the first guard, a blur of fur and teeth despite his injury disrupting the man's aim as his weapon discharged. Nathan dropped and rolled toward the second guard, sweeping the man's legs from beneath him. The guard fell hard, his shot going wild, bullet splintering tree bark instead of flesh. Nathan wrestled the weapon from the fallen guard, years of close quarters combat training taking over. The guard fought back with professional skill, landing a solid blow to Nathan's ribs before Nathan managed to strike a nerve cluster in the man's shoulder, temporarily paralyzing his arm. Shadow had the first guard pinned, jaws clamped around his gun wrist, blood from the dog's wound spattering the snow beneath them. The guard screamed, dropping his weapon. "Call them off, Blackwell." Nathan had the second guard's weapon now aimed at Blackwell's chest. "Or this ends now." Blackwell hadn't moved during the sudden violence, his expression almost appreciative as he watched Nathan's efficient takedown of his men. "You're quite good, Commander. Better than I expected from someone who's been out of the field for years." He reached slowly into his coat, causing Nathan to tighten his finger on the trigger. "Easy. Just getting my phone. To call off my men, as you requested." Blackwell produced a smartphone, holding it where Nathan could see the screen. He tapped a contact labeled Jenkins and put the phone on speaker. The call connected immediately. "Sir," Jenkins' voice was tight, professional. "We've lost the targets. They reached the main road. Possible civilian witnesses. Awaiting instructions." Blackwell's face remained impassive, but something flashed in his eyes. Calculation reassessment. "Fall back. Return to position 1. We're done for tonight." "Understood. Withdrawing now." Blackwell ended the call, returning the phone to his pocket with deliberate slowness. "It seems we've reached an impasse, Commander. Your allies escaped with whatever evidence they believe they have. My men are standing down. Perhaps we can discuss this situation like rational men now." "Tell your man to drop his weapon, then we'll talk." Nathan kept the gun steady, Shadow still growling at the first guard, who remained frozen in fear of the dog's teeth. Blackwell nodded to his guard, who reluctantly released his grip on his sidearm. Nathan kicked it away into the snow, then whistled softly to Shadow. The dog backed away from the guard, but remained vigilant, blood still seeping from his wound. Now, Blackwell straightened his coat, composure fully restored. "Shall we discuss terms? You're a military man. You understand negotiation, de-escalation, the value of compromise. The only terms I'm interested in involve you turning yourself in for Daniel West's murder and the theft of federal property." Nathan kept the weapon trained on Blackwell, but his attention was partially on Shadow, whose breathing had become labored, the blood loss beginning to take its toll. Blackwell noticed Nathan's concern. "Your dog needs medical attention. I have a veterinarian on call in town, one of the many businesses that exist because of my investment in this community." He stepped forward, hands raised slightly. "Let me help him, as a show of good faith." The offer was tempting, transparently manipulative, but addressing Nathan's most immediate concern. Shadow needed treatment soon, but accepting help from Blackwell meant surrendering leverage, creating obligation. Tactical error. "No, Shadow comes with me." Nathan began backing away, maintaining his aim on Blackwell. "Your men stand down. We leave the mountain. What happens next depends on how this night ends. You're making the wrong choice, Commander. Blackwell's voice hardened. Your companions won't find the reception in town they're expecting. Sheriff Harding knows which side his bread is buttered on. And even if they somehow bypass local authorities, what do they have? Old papers, a degraded recording, the ramblings of a disgraced history teacher, against the word of Victor Blackwell, philanthropist, job creator, pillar of the community. He smiled, confidence returning. The court of public opinion requires more than dusty allegations. Then why are you so desperate to stop us? Nathan continued his careful retreat, Shadow limping beside him. Why kill West? Why intimidate my uncle for decades? Why try to buy the lodge? Insurance, thoroughness, basic risk management. Blackwell's smile didn't waver. One doesn't build what I've built by leaving loose ends, even improbable ones. A distant sound cut through the night air, sirens approaching from the direction of town, multiple vehicles from the overlapping whales. Blackwell's expression flickered genuine surprise, crossing his features before the mask of control reasserted itself. Ah, it seems the situation continues to evolve. I wonder who young Tyler might have contacted besides the sheriff. He straightened his already immaculate coat. Shall we go meet our visitors together, Commander Present, a united front in the face of what will surely be considerable confusion? I don't think so. Nathan kept the weapon raised. You stay here with your men until I'm clear. Your choice. But remember this moment when I offered cooperation and you chose hostility. It speaks to intent, to character, useful context for whoever arrives at the end of those sirens. Nathan backed away, Shadow keeping pace despite his injury. When they reached the tree line, he whistled softly a command for Shadow to move ahead. The dog obeyed, disappearing into the darkness between the pines. This isn't over, Blackwell. It never is, Commander. That's the nature of the game we play. The older man remained perfectly still, hands now clasped behind his back, the picture of aristocratic patience. I'll see you in town. Nathan slipped into the forest, following Shadow's blood-spotted trail through the snow. The sirens were growing louder now, accompanied by flashing lights visible through the trees approaching up the mountain road toward the lodge. Multiple vehicles, more than Mountain Falls Sheriff's Department, would likely deploy for a routine call. Shadow had stopped about 50 yards into the forest waiting for Nathan. His breathing labored. The wound needed treatment, but first they needed to understand what was happening with those sirens. Friend or foe, Rachel and Tyler successful, or Blackwell's influence at work. Nathan moved carefully through the trees, Shadow limping beside him until they reached a vantage point overlooking the access road. 4 vehicles were making their way up the snow-covered track, 2 Sheriff's Department cruisers, but also 2 unmarked SUVs with government plates. Not local law enforcement. Federal. Relief washed through Nathan like a physical force. Rachel and Tyler had made it, had contacted not just local authorities, but federal ones. Blackwell's carefully constructed empire was about to face its first real challenge in decades. He turned to Shadow, crouching beside the injured dog. Good boy, you did it. We did it. The dog's tail wagged weakly, his intelligent eyes fixed on Nathan's face. Now let's get you taken care of. Nathan tore a strip from his thermal undershirt, fashioning a pressure bandage for Shadow's wound. The dog whimpered but remained still, understanding the necessity. The bleeding slowed, but proper medical attention couldn't wait. The vehicles had reached the clearing where Nathan had confronted Blackwell. From his position, Nathan could see figures emerging, uniformed sheriff's deputies, but also men and women in heavy winter coats with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Blackwell stood in the center of the clearing, hands now raised in apparent cooperation, his security personnel being secured by deputies. Movement in the periphery of Nathan's vision, Rachel and Tyler being escorted by a federal agent from one of the vehicles. They had made it back to the mountain, bringing reinforcements. The evidence had been compelling enough to trigger immediate federal response. Nathan weighed his options. Approaching the clearing meant surrendering control, becoming part of a process that might or might not deliver justice. Blackwell had resources, influence, decades of practice at manipulating systems. But Shadow needed medical attention, and Nathan had fulfilled his uncle's trust, bringing the evidence to light, breaking the silence Blackwell had enforced through fear and money. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. He gathered Shadow carefully in his arms, the dog heavy but unresisting, and began making his way toward the lights and movement in the clearing. Whatever came next would come. The truth buried for decades beneath snow and silence had finally emerged into the light. Commander Cole, a woman in a heavy FBI windbreaker approached as Nathan entered the clearing, her hand extended not in greeting but in a subtle restraining gesture. I'm going to need you to put down any weapons and keep your hands visible. Nathan carefully set Shadow down, then placed Blackwell's guard's pistol on the snow, raising his hands. My dog needs medical attention. He was shot. The agent assessed the situation quickly, professionalism overriding whatever questions she clearly had. Tyler, get the first aid kit from my vehicle. We have basic veterinary supplies. She maintained her professional distance, but nodded toward Shadow with genuine concern. We'll make sure he gets treatment. Across the clearing, Blackwell was being questioned by another agent, his hands now secured behind his back. The security team was already being loaded into the sheriff's vehicles. Rachel stood with a third federal agent, gesturing animatedly as she spoke, occasionally pointing toward the ridge where the bunker entrance lay hidden. Nathan felt a strange sense of disconnection watching the scene unfold. For the past 2 days, he had been at the center of escalating chaos, making life-or-death decisions, rediscovering purpose. Now abruptly, he was a participant in someone else's operation, reduced to witness status as larger forces took control. Nathan T. Rachel broke away from her conversation, limping quickly toward him despite her injured ankle. The FBI agent started to intercept her, then relented, then allowing her to reach Nathan's side. You're alive. We weren't sure when the shots. She stopped seeing Shadow's condition. Oh God, he's hurt. He'll be okay. Nathan crouched beside the dog, who had settled onto the snow, eyes alert despite his pain. The bullet grazed him. Looks worse than it is. Tyler arrived with the first aid kit, kneeling beside Shadow with unexpected confidence. My mom's a vet tech. I can help until we get him to the clinic. Nathan nodded, surrendering care of Shadow to Tyler's surprisingly competent hands. Rachel remained close, her presence a tangible reassurance after the isolation of confronting Blackwell alone. You got the evidence to them. Nathan gestured toward the federal agents now securing the scene. Rachel's expression shifted to fierce pride. Not just the local evidence. Tyler had contacts, his father left instructions, people to call if certain names ever resurfaced. We reached an FBI field agent who'd been monitoring Blackwell for years. Financial crimes, suspected connections to defense contract irregularities. She lowered her voice. They've been building a RICO case. Our evidence was the missing piece they needed to move. Across the clearing, Blackwell's voice rose suddenly, the composed facade cracking at last. This is outrageous. I built this town. I own this town. You have no jurisdiction here. The FBI agent questioning him remained impassive, continuing to read Miranda rights as Blackwell's control disintegrated into impotent rage. His pale eyes found Nathan across the distance, narrowing with cold hatred. This isn't over, Cole. Your uncle was a traitor. A thief just like me, but without the courage to admit it. Blackwell struggled against the agents now escorting him toward one of the SUVs. You've destroyed everything. For what? Some pathetic notion of justice. There is no justice, only power in those too weak to seize it. Nathan watched Blackwell's meltdown with detached interest, the desperate rationalizations of a man who had convinced himself his crimes were justified by their success. In that moment, Nathan recognized what separated him from men like Blackwell, not moral perfection or freedom from darkness, but the capacity to recognize wrong even when it benefited him, to choose right even when it cost him. William Cole had made that choice decade after decade, building his case in patient silence. Daniel West had made it, refusing to participate in theft even when offered wealth and security. Nathan had inherited not just his uncle's property, but his moral compass, his dedication to truth regardless of consequence. The FBI agent who had first approached Nathan returned her expression, professional but less guarded. Commander Cole, I need to ask you some questions about what happened here tonight and about the evidence Ms. Morgan and Mr. Simmons brought us regarding the Haven facility. I'll tell you everything I know. Nathan glanced at Shadow, now resting more comfortably with a proper bandage applied. But my dog needs a veterinarian as soon as possible. We have an emergency vehicle coming up the mountain now. She nodded toward the access road where headlights were indeed visible, approaching slowly through the snow. For all injured parties, her gaze moved meaningfully to Rachel's ankle, Tyler's bruised face from some encounter during their escape, Nathan's own visible injuries from the fight. What happens now? Rachel asked her historian's mind, already cataloging, organizing, preparing to document. Mr. Blackwell will be transported to federal custody. His assets will be frozen pending investigation. The agent's professional demeanor cracked slightly, allowing a glimpse of satisfaction. We've been after him for a long time. Financial crimes, suspected links to defense contract fraud, but we could never get solid evidence. Until now. Nathan looked toward the ridge where the bunker lay hidden beneath snow and decades of secrecy. My uncle spent his life gathering that evidence. Your uncle was a patriot, Commander Cole. The agent's voice softened with genuine respect. He could have profited from what happened here, chosen the easy path. Instead, he chose to fight a decades-long battle for justice, knowing he might not live to see it won. The words settled something in Nathan's chest, a question he hadn't fully articulated even to himself. Had William been complicit initially? Had he known about the theft before it happened? The agent's assessment matched Nathan's own emerging conclusion. William Cole had chosen the harder path, the longer fight, sacrificing immediate action for eventual justice. The emergency vehicle reached the clearing, a modified SUV with medical equipment. EMTs emerged, moving efficiently to assess the various injuries. One approached Shadow, kneeling beside the dog with professional concern. GSW to the right flank, through and through, minimal muscle damage. The EMT gently examined Shadow's wound. He's lucky, another inch and it would have hit lung or major vessels. Shadow endured the examination stoically, his eyes never leaving Nathan's face. When the EMT prepared to load him into the vehicle, Shadow resisted, struggling to return to Nathan's side. He won't go without you, Rachel observed softly. Loyalty goes both ways. Nathan crouched beside Shadow, whispering reassurances, promises to follow immediately. The dog relaxed slightly, allowing himself to be loaded into the emergency vehicle, but maintaining visual contact with Nathan until the doors closed. As the vehicle began its careful descent down the mountain, the FBI agent approached Nathan again. We'll need you to come to our field office in Burlington tomorrow for a formal statement. Tonight we'll get everyone medical attention and temporary accommodations in town. Nathan nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that followed adrenaline's retreat. 2 days of constant tension, physical confrontation, and emotional revelation had drained his reserves. But beneath the fatigue lay something else, a sense of completion, of promises kept and purpose fulfilled. The lodge, he said suddenly. I want to secure it before we leave. The agent hesitated, then nodded. I'll have one of my people accompany you. 5 minutes, no more. We're establishing a crime scene perimeter, and the lodge will be within it. Nathan and Rachel returned to Pine Ridge Lodge with a young FBI agent trailing at a respectful distance. The building looked different now, not abandoned or threatening, but somehow dignified. A silent witness to decades of secrets finally unburdening itself. Inside, Nathan moved directly to the loose floorboard where he'd hidden the metal case containing William's most important evidence. He retrieved it, then stood for a moment in the center of the main room, absorbing the space that had changed everything. What will you do with the lodge? Rachel asked, sensing his thoughts. After all this is over. Nathan considered the question, looking around at the sturdy bones of the structure beneath its surface decay. Fix it. Honor what it was meant to be. A home, a sanctuary. The word felt right as soon as he spoke it. My uncle built this place as a haven, the real kind, not the government's version. A place where damaged people could heal. Rachel nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. For veterans, like you, like me, like Shadow. Nathan ran his hand along the rough-hewn mantle, feeling the history in the wood. People who've seen darkness but are trying to find their way back to light. The young FBI agent cleared his throat apologetically from the doorway. Commander Cole, we need to move out now. The forensic team is arriving. Nathan took a final look around the lodge, not goodbye, but acknowledgement. A promise to return, to rebuild, to reclaim. Then he joined Rachel and the agent outside where the remaining vehicles waited to transport them down the mountain. In town, Mountain Falls looked like a movie set during a crisis scene. Lights blazed in buildings that should have been dark at this hour. People gathered on sidewalks despite the cold, watching as federal vehicles moved through streets that rarely saw outside authority. News of Blackwell's arrest had spread with the efficiency only small towns can manage. The sheriff's department had been effectively sidelined, with FBI agents establishing a command center in the town hall. Sheriff Harding himself was being questioned, his expression a mixture of indignation and poorly concealed fear. Blackwell's influence had extended deep into local government, and the reckoning was only beginning. Nathan was directed to the small medical clinic where Shadow had been taken. Inside, a veterinarian was completing treatment, bandaging the dog's wound with practiced efficiency. "He's going to be fine." The vet glanced up as Nathan entered. "Clean wound, no major tissue damage. He's strong and healthy otherwise. Keep him quiet for a few days, change the bandage as directed, and he'll heal completely." Relief washed through Nathan, releasing tension he hadn't fully acknowledged. Shadow's ears perked up at the sound of Nathan's voice, his tail thumping weakly against the examination table. "Thank you." Nathan moved to the dog's side, scratching gently behind his ears. "For everything you did, for leading me to the truth." Shadow licked his hand, once the simple gesture conveying what words never could: trust, loyalty, partnership. The bond that William had recognized and fostered, knowing someday it would matter more than either man or a dog could understand at the time. A soft knock at the door announced Rachel's arrival. She had been treated for her ankle, now properly wrapped and supported by a walking boot. "They've arranged rooms for us at the inn. Tyler's already there." His mother was pretty upset about him being involved in all this. "Can't blame her." Nathan helped Shadow carefully down from the examination table, the dog moving gingerly but steadily. "He showed courage tonight. So did you." Rachel shrugged, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I just did what any historian would do, made sure the record was preserved. The truth matters. It mattered enough for my uncle to spend his life protecting it, for Daniel West to die for it." Nathan led Shadow toward the door, the dog staying close to his side. "And for Victor Blackwell to build an empire trying to bury it." Outside, the night had taken on a surreal quality. Federal agents moved purposefully through the small town center, securing buildings, collecting documents, interviewing residents. Decades of Blackwell's influence were being methodically dismantled in a single night. The Mountain Falls Inn was a small, well-maintained building at the edge of the town square. Its lobby had been transformed into an impromptu briefing area, with agents coming and going. Residents providing statements, phones ringing constantly. The innkeeper, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, directed Nathan and Rachel to their rooms with brisk efficiency. "Your dog can stay with you. I'll bring up extra towels and some food for him." She eyed Shadow with professional assessment. "Handsome animal. Brave too, from what I hear." In the small but comfortable room, Nathan finally allowed exhaustion to claim him. Shadow settled on the rug beside the bed, positioned to watch the door even in his injured state. Rachel had taken the adjacent room, with a connecting door left partially open by mutual unspoken agreement. Safety and proximity and shared experience. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by tactical alertness ingrained during combat deployments. Each time Nathan woke, Shadow's eyes gleamed in the darkness, watchful, reassuring. The dog's presence anchored him, preventing the disorientation that often accompanied sleep in unfamiliar places. Morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through thin curtains. Nathan rose, moving to the window. Mountain Falls looked different in daylight, smaller, less mysterious, its buildings showing the wear of economic struggles despite Blackwell's supposed benevolence. The federal presence remained visible, gents moving between buildings, residents watching from storefronts with expressions ranging from concern to relief. A knock at the connecting door preceded Rachel's appearance, already dressed, her historian's notebook in hand. "They want us at the town hall at 9, formal statements." She studied his face, noting the signs of interrupted sleep. "You okay?" "Fine." Nathan moved to check Shadow's wound, carefully removing the bandage. The injury looked better in daylight, clean, already beginning to heal. Shadow submitted to the examination with stoic patience, then rose stiffly, ready to face the day, despite his discomfort. "He's a lot like you." Rachel leaned against the door frame, watching their interaction. "Stubborn, protective, doesn't know when to rest." "He's better than me." Nathan replaced the bandage with the fresh supplies the vet had provided. "Purer motivations, no complications." "Don't sell yourself short, Commander." She straightened, her teacher's authority asserting itself. "What you did last night, standing against Blackwell, protecting the evidence, giving Tyler and me time to get help, that was pure motivation. That was good, plain and simple." The words struck Nathan unexpectedly, a validation he hadn't realized he needed. In war, morality often blurred objectives, compromised by reality ideals, sacrificed to necessity. But here on this mountain, he had faced a clear choice between right and wrong, had chosen right regardless of consequence. William would be proud, Rachel added softly. Of both of you. She nodded toward Shadow. He knew what he was doing when he arranged for you two to find each other. At the town hall, the federal operation was fully established. Agents moved with purpose, processing evidence, conducting interviews, building the case against Blackwell and his network. Nathan recognized the controlled chaos of a major investigation, the same energy that accompanied significant intelligence breakthroughs in military operations. The FBI agent who had first spoken to Nathan at the clearing approached, offering her hand. Agent Rebecca Lawson, I don't think we were properly introduced last night. Her grip was firm, professional. Thank you for coming in. We have a lot to cover. She led them to a makeshift interview room, the town hall's small conference space now dominated by recording equipment and file boxes. Shadow followed, settling beside Nathan's chair with a soft groan of discomfort. Start from the beginning, Agent Lawson requested, activating the recording equipment. How you came to inherit Pine Ridge Lodge, what you found there, everything that led to last night's confrontation. Nathan recounted the events methodically, his military training evident in the precision of his report. Rachel added details from her perspective, her historian's memory, capturing nuances Nathan had missed. Together, they constructed a comprehensive narrative of William Cole's decades-long investigation, Daniel West's discovery, and likely murder in Victor Blackwell's systematic corruption of Mountain Falls. Agent Lawson listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly allowing them to speak uninterrupted. When they finished, she sat back, an expression thoughtful. What you've given us corroborates our existing financial investigation into Blackwell. We've been tracking unusual patterns in his business dealings for years. Shell companies, suspicious contracts with defense suppliers, money movements that didn't add up. She tapped her pen against her notebook. But we never had a source for his initial capital. The gold explains everything. What happens now? Rachel asked the same question she'd posed the night before, but now with the urgency of immediate concern replaced by historical perspective. Blackwell will face multiple federal charges, theft of government property, financial crimes, likely obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. Given the amount stolen and the duration of the crime, he's looking at significant prison time. Agent Lawson's professional detachment slipped a revealing satisfaction. His empire won't survive this. Too many connections to illegal activities, too many compromised officials. And Daniel West? Nathan leaned forward. What about justice for him? Agent Lawson's expression sobered. Murder investigations after 4 decades are challenging, but if we can locate remains with modern forensic techniques, it's possible. She made a note in her file. We'll be conducting extensive searches of Blackwell's properties, the mountain areas around the bunker. He confessed to me. Nathan recalled Blackwell's cold dismissal of West's death as sacrifice. In the clearing before you arrived, called it necessary sacrifice. Inadmissible without witnesses or recording, unfortunately. Agent Lawson sighed. But it gives us direction for investigation. And people who've kept secrets for 40 years sometimes decide to unburden themselves when facing other serious charges. The interview continued for hours, covering every detail of the evidence they discovered, every interaction with Blackwell and his men. Shadow remained patient throughout, occasionally shifting position to ease his injury but never leaving Nathan's side. When they finally emerged from the town hall, the winter day was waning, shadows lengthening across fresh snow. Mountain Falls seemed suspended between past and future. Its longtime patriarch removed its economic foundation, questioned its history, suddenly exposed to scrutiny. I need to go back to the lodge, Nathan announced, decision crystallizing as he spoke. Today, there might be more evidence of things we missed in the chaos. Agent Lawson, who had walked them out, frowned. The property is still an active crime scene. Our forensic team is processing it. I'm not asking permission. Nathan met her gaze directly. It's my property. I have the right to access it, crime scene or not. A standoff moment, authority against determination. Then Lawson nodded, reaching a practical compromise. I'll have one of my agents escort you. You don't touch anything without clearing it with the forensic team first. Agreed? Agreed. The drive back up the mountain felt different in daylight, with federal vehicles preceding and following their borrowed SUV. The road had been cleared, the previous night's confrontation areas marked with evidence flags and crime scene tape. Pine Ridge Lodge stood sentinel against the winter landscape, its weathered exterior now buzzing with activity as agents documented photograph collected. Nathan approached with Shadow limping beside him, nodding to the forensic technicians as he passed. Inside the lodge had been transformed equipment on every surface, evidence markers beside items of interest, the hidden compartments they discovered now fully exposed and being processed. He moved through the space slowly, seeing it with new eyes, not as an abandoned relic or a battlefield, but as possibility. The bones of the structure remained solid despite decades of neglect. The great room with its stone fireplace, the kitchen outdated but spacious, bedrooms upstairs enough to accommodate several people, a sun porch facing the mountain view. Rachel followed, sensing his shift in perspective. You're really thinking about it, aren't you? Making this a place for veterans? Not just thinking about it. Nathan ran his hand along a wooden support beam, feeling the strength beneath the weathered surface. Deciding, committing. It'll take work, money, time. I have time now. The realization struck him with unexpected force. For inheriting the lodge time had been his enemy, empty days stretching before him, purposeless and gray. Now suddenly he had a use for that time, a reason to fill it. Rachel studied his face, something softening in her expression. Need a history teacher? Someone who knows the area. The people who could help veterans understand the context of what they experienced, find meaning in it. The offer hung between them, tentative but sincere. Not just professional contribution, but personal investment, a sharing of purpose. I'd like that. Nathan found himself smiling, the expression feeling strange after so much tension. Shadow would too. He likes having someone around who appreciates his intelligence. As if recognizing his name, Shadow looked up, tail wagging once despite his injury. The dog that had guided him to truth, to purpose, to a future worth building. Outside, the winter sun was setting behind the ridge, painting the snow-covered slopes with amber and gold. Nathan stood on the porch, Rachel and Shadow beside him, watching the light transform the landscape. Below, Mountain Falls gathered its lights against the coming darkness, a community facing an uncertain future without its controlling influence. William chose this spot for a reason, Nathan said quietly. High enough to see what's coming, sheltered enough to weather the storms, strong enough to protect what matters. Rachel nodded, understanding the deeper significance beneath his words. A true haven. That's what we'll call it. Nathan made the decision instantly, rightness settling into place. Haven Lodge, not for gold or governments or secrets, for people who need what it offers. Shadow pressed against his leg, a solid presence grounding him to the moment, to the mountain, to the choice being made. The dog that had saved him in ways that went beyond physical protection or emotional support, that had led him to purpose when he'd thought purpose was behind him. As darkness fell, lights appeared on the access road, vehicles descending, the FBI team completing their day's work at the bunker site. Soon they would leave, taking their equipment, their evidence, their official purpose. But Nathan would remain, would rebuild, would transform what Blackwell had tried to corrupt into something worthy of William's sacrifice, of Daniel West's courage. I should go back to town, Rachel said reluctantly. The federal team wants me to review more documents tomorrow, help identify historical context. We'll be here when you're done. But Nathan included Shadow in the statement without thinking the partnership now fundamental to his understanding of himself. Plenty of work to keep us busy. Rachel hesitated, then leaned in, kissing his cheek as she had before their separation the previous night. But this time she lingered, the gesture evolving from encouragement to connection, from contingency to possibility. I'll hold you to that, Commander. She stepped back, professional composure returning, but something else visible beneath it now. Something hopeful. As Rachel departed with the last of the federal vehicles, Nathan remained on the porch, Shadow at his side. The mountain night enfolded them, stars emerging in impossible clarity above the snow-covered peaks. The cold was present, but no longer threatening, a condition to be respected rather than feared. Just you and me for now, boy. Nathan scratched behind Shadow's ears, feeling the dog lean into his touch. But not for long. Shadow looked up, intelligent eyes reflecting starlight, seeming to understand as he always did. The dog who had remembered when humans had forgotten, who had remained loyal when loyalty seemed obsolete, who had led his human back to purpose, back to meaning, back to the path William Cole had prepared for him decades before. Together they turned and entered the lodge, closing the door against the night. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not retreat, but advance. Not hiding from the world, but preparing a place where the wounded could heal, where the broken could be made whole, where the snow would someday melt to reveal not secrets, but truth. Haven Lodge, a sanctuary built on the ruins of deception, a promise kept to the dead and the living alike, a purpose worthy of the sacrifice that had preserved it. And as Nathan moved through the darkened rooms, planning renovations, envisioning future gatherings, Shadow followed guardian and guide both. The future stretching before them, not in battle plans or tactical objectives, but in the simple, profound work of healing, of building, of creating something that would outlast them both.